Welcome to chapter 16 of Planet Omar. When Friday evening finally came round, I was very excited. I had somehow made it to the weekend without getting my bones broken by Daniel, and I was going to be fasting the next day, which meant I was one step closer to my Ferrari. I knew I had to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to eat before sunrise, and that's basically the middle of the night. At first, I couldn't even sleep because I was too excited about getting up when I normally wouldn't be allowed to. But the next thing I knew, Mariam was waking me up, saying, "Get up, brat face," and poking me in the ribs with long fingers, and for some weird reason, blowing on my face, complete with added bits of spit. Was Shaitan still whispering to her somehow and making her be mean? It took me a moment to remember why I wasn't supposed to be asleep, but then I jumped out of bed. Midnight feast! I whizzed down the stairs and jumped onto my seat on the table in the kitchen, and then I jumped right back up to get my favourite cereal. "How are you this perky in the morning?" said something that sounded a bit like Dad. Mum and Dad looked different, like half zombies. They weren't speaking very much, and when they did, it was just one or two words, and it was a bit slurred. Eggs, usually said as, "Would you like some eggs?" Hot, usually said as, "Be careful, it's hot." They were also moving a lot slower than normal. I imagined it was because the whole room was filled with thick zombie slime and they were wading through it in slow motion. Adults are funny. I can't understand why they have different levels of energy depending on how much sleep or coffee they've had. I'm basically the same all the time. I think Mariam was on her way to being an adult because she was at least a quarter zombie while we were eating suhoor. I had some cereal and was forced to have egg and porridge too, with biscuit spread, obviously, and then we all went back to bed. And when I woke up on Saturday morning, I had to remember not to eat breakfast and not to drink or eat anything. I was doing fine until about noon when my tummy started to rumble a bit. I ignored it and tried to distract myself by building a Lego Triceratops, and it worked because the tummy rumbling went away, and by the time Dad announced that we had to get into the peanut to go to the supermarket, I'd forgotten all about hunger. And that was, well, until we actually reached the supermarket and I saw the shelves all stacked with pain au chocolat and waffles and crumpets. Even the things I don't normally eat, like quiche, sat on shelves looking more yummy than they ever did before. My tummy growled like H2O. My inside suddenly ached and my legs pretended to be jelly sticks. On the drive back, I asked Dad if I could break my fast. He said that I could because I was a kid, and at least I tried. And he said there was a reason why Allah said that kids don't have to fast. Their bodies aren't like adult bodies. But are you sure Allah won't mind? I asked. He said of course Allah won't mind, and that Allah would just be happy that I had wanted to try in the first place. You could always try again next weekend if you like. And that made me happy. I took a pain au chocolat out of the bag next to me and took a big bite. Just for the record, I did try again next weekend and I kept a whole fast, and I've been looking forward to my Ferrari Italia ever since. Chapter 17. We'd been living in our new house for 7 whole weeks. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it was weird. My bedroom really felt like my bedroom now. Even though when I shut my eyes, I could still remember exactly how my old room looked, with the stickers on the wardrobe that was peeling off and the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that Dad helped me put up when I was younger, and Issa's teddies all over the floor. I didn't feel like I wanted to move back. I liked pretty much everything about where we were living now. Everything except, can you guess? Daniel, obviously. Nobody else seemed to have a problem with me, but Daniel kept ruining everything. Most of our class hung out together in the playground, and though Charlie was my best friend, we often played football with Philippe and Jaden and Jessica. Once or twice, the girls on the table next to ours even asked for my help in science. Even Sarah, who is smart at everything. I'll give you an example of how Daniel made me feel miserable about a million pointless things. One Wednesday afternoon, Mrs. Hutchinson asked a question. It was the type of question that teachers ask when they know that kids won't know the answer, but they ask it anyway, just to see. She asked, "What is DNA?" The class went blank. I knew Mrs. Hutchinson had expected that because she didn't look disappointed. I knew what it was, I just didn't want to be a show-off. Okay, does anyone know what jeans are? One kid put his hand up proudly and said, "Clothes." "No," she said slowly, stretching it out, which meant that she wanted other guesses. "Genies?" asked another kid, clearly unsure. Mrs. Hutchinson's face smiled, but her hair and eyes gave it away. She was sad that her class didn't have at least a clue about what jeans were. I couldn't take it anymore, and I shot my hand up. Genes are what makes us what we are. They're like special instructions. They decide what colour our eyes are and things like that. And DNA is where the genes are found, lots of them. Mrs. Hutchinson's hair sprang to life like flowers that had been watered. She said she was astonished at how much I know about genes. I told her my parents were both scientists and it was kind of their favourite topic. Charlie gave me a high five, but then Daniel gave me a rotten look, and suddenly I wished I'd never said anything at all. Every time he glared at me or pushed me and Charlie around in the playground, it reminded me of what he'd said, that I should be kicked out of my home and sent to a country I've never even visited. I didn't think he could be right, but if he wasn't, then why would Riza believe it was going to happen too? At home, things were just as normal. Everyone was settled into the Ramadan routine and starting to plan for Eid, which was just around the corner. We have 2 Eids in the year, and they are the 2 best days of the year for me. There's Eid al-Fitr, which was the Eid coming up, the one that is for celebrating that we fasted for the whole month and earned lots of reward points. And there's Eid al-Adha, just a couple of months later, which basically celebrates Hajj. That's when people go to Mecca on a holy journey. And we have to sacrifice a sheep or something like that on Eid, like Prophet Abraham did. But obviously, if you don't have a farm, you can't do it yourself. If I had to choose, my favourite Eid is the first one, because that is when I seem to get a whole lot more presents. Maybe by the second one, everyone's money is run out or something. I usually drop a lot of hints about what I want, what presents to get me. Please, can I have an Xbox, please? Okay, maybe it's not hinting. Maybe that's just begging. My mum orders lots of the presents and Eid clothes online. But it's funny because when the delivery man comes, she runs around the house going, ah, looking for a headscarf, which is never where she left it. It usually involves her hopping from room to room before sprinting upstairs to grab one and opening the door, panting and apologising. Once or twice, she's even grabbed my hoodie and used it as a hijab. The last time this happened, Mariam pointed out that people who aren't Muslim must think that women wear their scarves on their heads all day long. Even at home, because whenever she comes to the door, Mum always has one on. They must think that Mum sleeps in it, and showers in it, and eats her breakfast in it. When Mariam isn't being Princess Grumpy Pants, she can be really funny. The thought of Mum showering in her headscarf had us laughing for literally 7.5 minutes. I kept imagining her shampooing it and blow drying it, and then at dinner, out of the blue, Mariam shouted out, "Shower scarf!" And I spat my food all over the table because I laughed so hard. And chapter 18. Have you ever gone on a school trip but never quite made it to where you were supposed to be going? If you haven't, you're lucky. Because me, I seem to be a trouble magnet. My class was supposed to be going to the Science Museum. My parents were obviously excited about this. The Science Museum had a new section called the Wonder Lab, which Mum and Dad took us to as soon as it opened. But it was super cool, so I didn't mind going again. Especially because they have these slides made out of different materials to teach you about friction, and one of them's really fast, so fast that I almost peed myself laughing the first time I went on it. We were put into groups of 6 for the trip. A teaching assistant or parent was in charge of each group. I could tell Mrs. Hutchinson was stressed that morning because some curls from her hair were looking pretty and in place, and others were sticking out in funny directions, completely ignoring gravity. I listened as she read out the names for the groups, and my heart was thudding in my chest. I had my fingers crossed under the table because I really didn't want to be in Daniel's group. I knew I wasn't supposed to believe in crossing fingers, but I was trying anything. It was only later that I realised I didn't even ask Allah not to put me in Daniel's group. My mum said that if I had, Allah might have put me in a different group, or he might have even still put me in Daniel's group because he works in mysterious ways. As you've probably guessed, I was put in a group with Daniel, and Charlie was put in a whole different group. Ouch! When our names were announced, Daniel looked over at me and snarled. And the worst bit was that it wasn't even a teacher in charge of our group. It was just another kid's parent, and she had no idea which kids were troublemakers and which were not. Charlie came up to me and said, "Don't worry, okay? We can still look at things together in the museum, okay?" I said, "Okay," too. I was feeling too miserable to say anything else. To get to the museum, we had to go on the London Underground, and it was going pretty all right until we tried to change trains, and Daniel was like a lion waiting to pounce. As soon as we switched platforms, in the rush of people, he took hold of the belt of my trousers and jerked me back. "Your girlfriend Charlie can't save you now," he barked. Have you ever wanted to laugh in a horrible situation? I don't know why, but I cracked up laughing. Even though I was probably about to get hit by the worst bully I'd ever met, it was a weird kind of not real laugh though, and it just seemed to make Daniel more furious. Oh, so you think it's funny, do you? Teacher's pet? People in dark suits and smart shoes were walking past us as if nothing out of the ordinary was going on. Our group, the class, we'll get left behind, I finally managed to squeak. Daniel looked over and saw what I saw, a crowd of busy-looking people exiting the platform, but nobody from our school. He seemed to freeze, and then just for a few seconds later, we were the only two people left. And what happened next was completely astonishing. Daniel started wailing like a baby. Wah! We're lost! We're going to die! I realised that I was going to have to handle this situation and take care of the big crying bully baby in front of me, even though Daniel was making me want to cry too. I had been on the London Underground with my parents millions of times, but never on my own. It looked different now that I was on my own. It looked bigger, noisier, darker, scarier, and it smelled of wee. Oh no, wait, that was Daniel. He had weed himself. And that takes us to chapter 19, which we'll have to wait for tomorrow. Oh no, they're stuck on the underground on their own in a puddle of wee. We'll find out tomorrow what happens next.